I think it's interesting because like automation and scale and data, sometimes people hear those terms and they think, okay, great, that lets us not have to talk to as many people, right? And that's kind of the old world. You know, you think about automation in the old contact centers. It's like, how do we prevent this customer from ever being able to talk to us? Well, we're going to hide the phone number. We're going to make them use an interactive voice system that doesn't actually work, right? We're going to have like some kind of chatbot thing that doesn't work. And that was avoiding human interaction. But I'd argue that all of the modern businesses where the customers have all this power and where you need to keep them, you need to grow them, you're trying to get more human interactions. What you're trying to do less of is like the administrative work, right? Less manual work, less low value work, less things that like could be an email instead of being a meeting. So you have more time to spend with human beings, at your customers and your clients. I mean, I think everyone that I talk to wants more time with their clients, not less.
Welcome to the Human Insight podcast, where we help you bridge the empathy gap to bring you a valuable, new understanding of some of the most innovative ideas and trends shaping the future of business and customer experience.
Hi, everyone. As we wrap up Season 4 of the Human Insights podcast, we wanted to share a few bonus episodes with you. This is the last installment of 3 LinkedIn Live conversations that Andy and Janelle had as part of their user-tested book tour. In this episode, Andy talks with Nick Mehta, CEO at Gainsight, a customer success and product experience platform. We hope you enjoy the show.
All right. Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us on another conversation as part of our live book series tour. Today, I'm excited to have Nick on. Just as a reminder, we are officially launching tomorrow with our book, User Tested, which will be available online. And we'll a little bit later talk about how you can get a free chapter if you'd like to take a look. So we're excited, Nick. We're just going to talk a little bit about customer centricity today, but I'd love to just let everybody hear a little bit about your background. Nick is, from my point of view, one of the most customer-centric CEOs in the software industry. CEO of Gainsight, has really championed customer focus, customer success. So maybe, Nick, just in case anyone doesn't know your background or know about Gainsight, maybe give us just a little bit of background to fill people in.
Totally, Andy. First of all, great to be here, and congrats on the book. So exciting, man. You know that we've done books too, and they're a lot of work. So excited that it's coming out, and I'm definitely going to read it. So Nick Mehta, CEO of Gainsight. I've been in enterprise software for about a couple decades now. I won't give the exact number. I'm too old now. But in those decades, you know, I went from the old model where we would sell customers our products, and they would buy them and pay up front, and kind of they're going to use them no matter, or they're going to have it no matter what, and we move on to the next customer. To then moving to these cloud and SaaS models where you got to constantly be driving value for customers. Most people refer to that process as customer success. Make your customer successful. They're going to stay with you longer. They're going to spend more money. They're going to be a bigger fan. And Gainsight, our whole mission is helping companies drive customer success through their teams. They have CSM teams that are managing customers. We help them with that. Through their kind of customer communities, getting customers connected to each other, and actually in their products as well, helping to build products that more naturally are adopted and onboarded.
Awesome. Yeah, I love, when we dive into this a little bit, I love the way that you've really brought Gainsight through that evolution, which was really, in the B2B software world is very, field focused. And then now we're really all trying to complement the field focus with sort of scale. So how do you think about balancing the sort of, I don't know if I'd call it scale or data centric approaches with the fact that we're all people, like we like to interact with other people, we're human beings. So how do you think about balancing that when folks are trying to run, customer-centric businesses, maybe in the like B2B software realm initially? Like, how do you think about that?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because like automation and scale and data, sometimes people hear those terms and they think, okay, great, that lets us not have to talk to as many people, right? And that's kind of the old world. You think about automation in the old contact centers. It's like, how do we prevent this customer from ever being able to talk to us? Well, we're going to hide the phone number. We're going to make them use an interactive voice system that doesn't actually work, right? We're going to have like some kind of chatbot thing that doesn't work. And that was avoiding human interaction. But I'd argue that all of the modern businesses where the customers have all this power and where you need to keep them, you need to grow them, you're trying to get more human interactions. What you're trying to do less of is like the administrative work, right? Less manual work, less low value work, less things that like could be an email instead of being a meeting. So you have more time to spend with human beings, at your customers and your clients. I think everyone that I talk to wants more time with their clients, not less.
Yeah, I think that's right. In the book, we highlight over 30 positive case studies of how people do it. I will tell you what you just described, Nick, was part of my morning. I was in the trouble trees, and I was actually trying to do some work with my bank.
Oh
and
my God.
It was funny. I feel like I had a little PTSD while you were describing that of what my morning. But what was interesting is at one point, they just called me. I mean, it's such a simple thing. Like somebody just finally called me. It's like, what are you trying to do here? And we had like a 2-minute conversation, and like then the process that the rest of it is automated or whatever is going to sort of like work itself out. So I think that's right. I think sometimes we can be a little bit so focused on trying not to have somebody involved that it's really hard to sort of get things done.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the thing. There, people use terms like call deflection, right? Like, how do we deflect so the people don't call us, right? Like, which feels like the wrong strategy for the future.
I don't know. As a customer, I love the idea of being deflected from the brands. Really. So I think that's right. So maybe if I don't want to put you on the spot, but like, give me a sense of a good experience that you think you've had. Like when you think of a great customer experience, Nick, as somebody, I mean, you probably like me, you see it, right? You live in it. Like, I feel like now I live in this world being at user testing where like when I see a certain UI design or a bad experience, I'm so tuned into this now that I'm like, that's not a good answer. What kind of customer experiences really sort of surprise and delight you in your, from your point of view?
Yeah, it's interesting. And I'll answer kind of as a human being, like as a consumer, and then also maybe from a business perspective too, just give you two different lenses, right? So a human being, I'll choose perhaps the controversial one now, because I'm definitely one of those advocates. I think the Peloton customer experience is incredible. Whether or not they're good at deciding how much inventory they should have or how many, those types of things, maybe, they need to change. But like one thing I love about it is they combine human and digital, right? So you think about the Peloton, and even if you haven't ridden one, I think everyone knows what Peloton is: digitally connected bike, right? I think it's basically these three different things together that to me like are the ingredients for a great experience in the future. So number one is human beings, right? So what is Peloton? If you ride it, it's your relationship with this coach, right? Like, I mean, I am on Team Cody, if you know Cody Rigsby, and many others, by the way, but Cody's definitely my number one. And like, it's that coach, that relationship you have, right? And that human connection that's facilitated obviously through internet and whatever. And then number two is it's the digitally instrumented product that lets me see my rides and my watts and my whatever, right? And then number three, it's the community of human beings with all those other people riding, and you see the leaderboard and the high fives and the hashtags, right? And so those three things together, Cody, you can think of him as almost like the CSM, the customer success manager, right? The fitness success manager. You've got the bike, that's kind of like the product-led growth type thing. And then you've got the community. And I think those are the three ingredients that you need. And picking now a more B2B example, a company I think does a really good job of this, and we use them, and you might use them too, they're pretty popular, is Gong, right? Which is a call recording software for people. It's more than that. It's kind of revenue intelligence, but the core is it records all your calls with customer conversations, et cetera, et cetera. And use it for basically sales training and things like that. And what I love about Gong is there's they do a great job of customer success. Their CSM team really works with us. They've got a product that's instrumented to drive value in the product itself. And they've got this great community. So I kind of feel like that triad of those three things to me is like the future.
I think that's right. I feel like one of the things about Gong too, and companies like them, that you also feel like they just get it. I mean, they're trying to help a sales team be successful. It's
That's
like,
right.
What do you need to be successful as a sales team? You need successful salespeople. What does it take to be a successful salesperson? Like, you've got to know the market, the competitive situation, how to respond and interact with customers. And it's like, well, how do you get good at that? And they've really taken, I think for sales, great sales teams, I think, are sort of learning sales teams, or sort of goal oriented. Yep. And I feel like part of that space that's so interesting is it sort of uses that mentality to the extreme advantage of like, this is a bunch of highly competitive people that want to be great at their craft. Let's give them tools that make them better. And I think there's something about that I think that's really special. That's
a really good point, because that is the core thing. And I think in both examples, it's this understanding of the customer at a deep level, right? Actually, one of the misnomers about Gong early on, people thought, salespeople won't want to have their calls recorded. But actually turns out the opposite. It's exactly what you said. Salespeople want to get better, right? So they love having things recorded so they can get better and learn and stuff like that.
So I think that's a good example of maybe a surprising thing. Maybe even they learned as they were iterating, like how much people were leaning into that. One of the things that my last company, when I was at Acton Software, that was interesting, was they would listen to each other's calls live And so your call would end and you're like fresh off the call. And then other people would give you some feedback on how the call went. I thought that was a really interesting, like,
that's pretty
sort
cool
of
development.
teaming experience, right?
Yeah.
And so I guess, have you had an experience in your sort of product centric background where you learn something about users that surprises you? And I think we find this, we're all used to being data driven, right? You're reading all the data and you're driving the metrics and all this. And then you have those moments, and we've all had them where you sort of like take a step back and you're like, I hadn't thought of it like that, but that's really interesting. Like, have you had moments that really changed how you thought of your own products from talking to customers or learning something about customers?
Every week, because I mean, I really think I love data, but I think data without the human insights is almost like it's at best neutral, and at worst it's dangerous, because you end up just coming up with like stories that may or may not be true about what that data is telling you, right? And so we have our probably similar to you, Andy. We do review meetings of like the products, right? So we have different teams in our company. So about 25 different product teams that build different parts of the Gainsight product suite. And then I have a review with each of those teams basically once a quarter. So kind of divided up over the quarter. There's, meeting different teams at different times. And when those reviews happen, people present, their data, right? So adoption data, how much is this feature being used? They present information about, NPS and feedback and all that. And I always ask them to have customer stories on there, right? Because I want to know like real customer stories so we can see both those together. I'll tell you an example of an area where we really almost went totally wrong. So we have a really cool AI-based bot that lives in Slack that you can talk to basically tell you about customer health and things like that. And that product was being adopted by maybe 10% of our users overall. So we were like, oh gosh, this thing isn't taking off. We should, I don't know, should we just like put in maintenance mode or whatever? And it turned randomly, I was in a meeting, one of our customers, and they said, oh, our CEO is addicted to that bot. And then we dug in more, and it turned out like it was 10% of our users, but it was like the most important 10% of our users. Right? And it was like, and they were like using it to prepare for meetings, and they were like super, kind of religious about it. And so it was one of those situations where if you hadn't had some customer interaction, you would have made exactly the wrong decision. It turned out it was actually very important for us, but the data might have showed us that it wasn't. So that's an example.
I love it. We had it reminded me of an example when I was working at Salesforce. I haven't thought of this in a long time, but your story jogged my memory of, we had this one page that in my product area, we thought was our most visited page. And we spent this incredible amount of time trying to optimize that page and all this kind of stuff and what people were spending time on. And interestingly, the next page most people visited was often the homepage. So it's like whatever they were doing, they were completing, and then they were going all the way back. We're like this, so we had all this time being spent on optimizing this page. And we actually did a little bit of user research. It was before I knew about user testing. We actually paid a firm to help us figure this out. And what we found was people were going there by mistake. Like it was like they were wandering into this page looking for something else. And so we were spending all this time, and it was sort of one of these things where like, the word could kind of mean two things, and they were looking for one version of like what they were trying to do. Totally. And so here we are thinking like we're capturing all this traffic in this great area, and they're so happy with it. They're going to the homepage afterwards. And it's like, no, they're so frustrated that they've wandered into the wrong part of the site. They're literally starting over. So it was like,
that's such a good example. That's why I feel like every time I see data, I'm like, I want to know the stories, because how do we know what hypotheses we even have based on this data if we don't have stories? I think stories give you the hypothesis, and then you can use data to prove the hypothesis, right? I could go in that example I showed, I could have gone and looked at all the other users of this feature and looked them up on titles and figured out, is that true or not? But without stories, how do you have hypotheses?
Right. Well, I agree with that. I think it's the hypothesis. So it's funny. It's like we start there, and it's also where we end. I feel like as the CEO, it's how I communicate, right? I tell stories to folks what we're doing. It's even what politicians do when they get out on the road. They tell us about the data, but then they tell us a story. They tell like, I met a woman in Iowa, and here's what she told me. And you're like, oh yeah, that's the thing we should go fix. Like it's also how we sort of rally the troops. Maybe that's another area I'd love some thoughts from you on, which is you did this. I thought it was great. This whole human first leadership series for a while, but really talking about how, when we run a business, we spend a lot of time looking at our P&Ls, our operating metrics and stuff. But ultimately, we're leading people, and we're sort of, so tell us a little bit, maybe slightly adjacent to our topic, but even in the book, we talk a little bit about how companies are using our platform and platforms like it to get feedback from employees about what their experience is like, because it's not just data. So how do you, in a scaling tech-centric company stay connected to people in your organization? Like, how do you continue to be a people first leader at the scale you're at?
Totally. And just for the context for people that didn't follow that, one of the things we talk about at Gainsight is human first business. And it's actually our mission statement is actually nothing to do with customer success. It's to be living proof you can win in business while being human first. And so human first is the idea that all of the different entities we interact with in business, we call them customers or prospects or deals. We call them candidates. We call them alumni. They're just human beings, right? Even your competitors are just human beings. Like that's a crazy thought, but it's true. And so how do we have a more human approach to everyone we interact with? And it's a huge part of everything that drives our company and our values and all that. And so to answer your question, obviously we want those human interactions with our team as well, and really, really getting to know them as people. And so what we do, I don't think is radically different. We do tons of roundtables. And when I do the onboarding, I only talk about our values and human first. I don't talk about anything else. And, I ask people, actually one kind of cool little thing, after I onboard, we hire, 40, 50 people a month. When I onboard them, I tell them all to send me a Slack message today because I know you're a new employee and it's like intimidating to Slack the CEO, but if you send me one, the next one won't be intimidating. So I just tell them, send me a GIF, send me an emoji, send me a joke, send me, whatever. And really just trying to build some of those direct connections, especially as you know, Andy, right now, like with less in-person interaction and with the great resignation, it's like more important than ever. And so something we're really, really passionate about is trying to create more and more forums for people to just be their authentic human selves.
I love that. I'm going to steal that, by the way. I have no pride of stealing stuff from Nick and great ideas on how to run a company.
I've stolen many from you too, Andy. So we'll call it even.
I think that's a great one. And it's funny. One of the things we talk about with customers of ours is that one of the hardest things for folks that are new to the area of collecting feedback like this is doing the first one, launching the first test. Especially some folks do what are called live interviews where they'll actually, like this, they'll get on and they'll talk to a real user. And if you're from maybe more behind the customer lines role in a company where maybe you're a designer or an engineer and you don't work with customers every single day, it's sort of one of these, like getting that first one done. And then you go, wow, that was really illuminating. Like I learned all these things about the people that use the thing I designed, the thing that I built. It's really quite rewarding. And you sort of get going, but it's funny how that first step is the one that sort of gets people comfortable with the idea that it really shouldn't be intimidating to talk to customers, to kind of listen to their needs. What things do you do to get out and talk to customers? Maybe get out being an interesting phrase with the way we're all living on Zoom right now. But what do you do to stay connected to your customers? I mean, you have customers all over the world. Yeah,
totally. No, I do a lot. In fact, actually, if you Google Nick Mehta 500 customers, I wrote this whole kind of like 10-step toolkit of what I do to stay in touch with customers. And, none of it's rocket science, but there's some stuff about creating habits. As you know, Andy, it's all about habits, right? So some example habits are like, we obviously have an executive sponsor program. I'm sure you do for your big clients as well. And I'm an exec sponsor for clients. And so we use our own software, Gainsight, to remind me and then kind of come up with like a draft note to send to the client, that says, hey, want to reconnect, et cetera, right? So that happens naturally. Another thing that happens pretty consistently is when we're in a sales process with a potential client, sometimes we want to connect with the executive so we can understand, okay, what are their high level goals? And so we can make sure we align to those, and the sales team will identify those folks, and then I'll reach out to that client and set up a call. But one of the things that we try to do is also just stay on top of those serendipitous moments to interact with clients, right? So you have that, and to me, looking at company news is huge. When we have a feature in our product, and it's pretty easy to do in lots of ways, which alerts you to news about your customer. So news about your customer is a great way to reach out, right? I'm sure you do that too. It's like, oh, they just raised money. They just went public. They just did X, Y, and Z. And so kind of doing that. And then last one, I think, which is kind of ties back to this human first thing. To me, one of the most biggest opportunities for all of us is to reach out to people in their career process, whether it's they're looking for a job and they want advice, or they just got let go, unfortunately, and they need a job, or they just took a new job and they're trying to get up to speed, and really trying to help people. And as you know, Andy, I'm being laser focused on this one career of customer success management. I've gotten to know it very, very well. And like pretty much most people looking for a job will end up reaching out to me or Gainsight, and then most companies looking for people will reach out to us, and we host events for new chief customer officers to get to know each other. And so that whole process to me of the career is a chance to lean into your customer's humanity. Because one thing is common, all of us actually want to have a successful career, whatever job you're in, right? And so there's a chance to kind of know your customer, not just as like a business, but as a human being with career aspirations.
I like that. And I like your thought on sort of the serendipitous opportunities, but maybe also nudged by what's going on in the world.
Yeah,
I mean, one of the interesting things that we have found with some of our customers is that when their brand, when their product, when their company is sort of having a moment, it's actually a great time to go do customer feedback collection, to go do research. It's sort of like, oh, like I was just thinking about you guys. It's like, well, it's not a coincidence. Like we're sort of leaning into that market opportunity. And I like that. And I also think one of the other things that I remember reading through your list of 10 things and sort of the habits that you form. And I think one of the things that I really valued in the perspective that you bring to getting customer feedback is it's not just the ones that folks bring you as the CEO, right? Yeah. I mean, you want to see what's going on across the business. It can't just be the ones everybody is sort of handing in front of you. I think it's similar. I mean, we hear a lot of companies now saying, how do I go deliberately find different audiences, different perspectives, different voices to listen to in what I'm doing? And that's even a little bit harder in today's like Zoom era where you're only getting the things you sort of connect to. And so finding those ways to sort of reach outside the typical lines of communication. We've been doing here at User Testing some sort of, we did like a random mix up for a little while as part of our company kickoff where you just sort of connect with different people, in part because it is harder to have that like serendipitous run in. And I think that's true with customers too. I mean, I don't know that it's as easy anymore if you're in merchandising to just run into some customers at a storefront these days or, things like that. So
it's a good point. It's interesting because one example that I went through in the last year is in our company, in our customer base, as I'm sure with yours, there's different roles, right? So in our case, there's a executive that's running customer success, and chief customer officer, a VP of customer success. There might be managers and directors, and there's actually a role that's quite important in our field called customer success operations. That's the people that are managing the processes and the systems like Gainsight and so on. And those people, honestly, as the CEO of a 1,200 person company, I'm not like the sales team isn't having me reach out to them, right? And so, but I think they're so important to get that story and that voice. And so last year, I basically gave myself an OKR, which was I want to do one call a week with a CS operations person, right? And so I basically reached out to a bunch of them, and they were all very kind. I said, I'll send you a Gainsight jersey if you do the call with me. And the call literally was just like, tell me your career story, and then how do we make it easier for people in this career? How do we enable you, support you, et cetera? And I learned so much, not just like tactical, we should do X, Y, and Z, but just who these human beings are, what motivates them, things like that. So that was so cool.
I think that's awesome. And one of the things too, that's an interesting analogy or analogous between our users and your CSM community is, Gainsight really created in many ways an industry, a new way of doing things, a new practice. And it's one thing to sort of preach that to the choir, right? I'm sure there were people in customer support roles or account executive roles that sort of wanted to see that change. It's also a different thing to get organizations to sort of value that, manage that, make it part of the process. And I think a lot of our users go through that same experience. When we talk to UX researchers and things like that, they say, look, I'm always trying to like champion my work, champion what I'm doing, champion my team. Like what guidance do you give to those kind of CS ops people or CS leaders? I mean, you must have, I bet you have a conversation a week with a CS leader who's like, how do I make it more visible in my organization?
Yeah.
How do I make sure
every
it's a priority?
Every day, actually, literally.
So what, I mean, so we do those same things in UX research. What advice do you give to folks when they're sort of championing, scaling their function, having impact across the company?
Totally. I mean, number one would be grit, because these things take a while, right? You got to keep going, and it's never going to be one thing, and all of a sudden the light bulbs goes off. But I think there's a couple of things that we've learned. Okay, so one is that obviously you want to be able to make that connection to the business model, right? How does what you're doing connect to the business model of the company? And so, as you know, Andy, we've done a lot of work to help customer success people translate their work to the ROI of like shareholder value. Customer success can increase your multiple or your market cap or whatever, and kind of arming them with that messaging that might work at the CEO level, the CFO level, the board level. But the second thing I think is arming them with the peer-to-peer messaging of how this is going to help their peer functions, right? So in our case, how does customer success help the product team? How does it help sales team? How does it help marketing team, right? What's that mutual connection? And same thing, I mean, what you do helps every department in the company, right? I mean, it's like you were saying before, it just happens that you have a kind of a key stakeholder that gets it started, right?
Yep.
And how do you arm them with what's the message on how they help everyone else? So sometimes I think people think CEOs have more power than they do. They're like, how do I convince my CEO? And I'm like, honestly, for the most part, I say yes to everything in Gainsight. But like the truth is, like to really get things done, you need to convince a lot of other people, right? I'm sure same thing's true at user
exactly.
Tech, right? It's like, how do you build those like mid-level relationships and help other people out. And the example I always give you I'll give you from the CS world. CS people often are like, oh, how do I help influence my product team? Right? That's a very common thing. Well, I want to make my product better for my customer. Totally. We all agree on that. Well, the way to not do it is make your relationship always just be about escalation, right? The normal way that things happen often is customer success person says, we got to build this feature. We got to fix this bug. And the product person has like 1,000 requests like that in their queue, right? There's no shortage. You and I both worked in product. There's no shortage of people asking you for stuff when you're in product, right?
Yeah.
But instead of the CS person, but in addition to the CS person approach the product person says, hey, I saw one of your goals this quarter is working on this new product. How can I help you? Can I assemble a panel of customers for you to talk to? Can we create an advisory board? So how do you actually help them? So I think that's something to always think about is like, genuinely, like, what are you doing to help them in their goals?
I love that. And I think one of the things we've been talking to our customer base about is that, especially in B2B companies, the opportunity to partner with the CS team from a design and research standpoint, I feel like it's sort of like an untapped, massive opportunity. It's like you're trying to go out and collect qualitative feedback. You've got a team of folks deployed, talking to customers, kind of connecting those two dots seems like a big opportunity.
I really think it is. Yeah. For CS folks watching, I think it's an interesting use case for user testing. So
yeah, we'll have to build out one of those, we'll build out a flow between Gainsight and user testing. So can capture
there you
that.
go. Let's do it.
Well, good, Nick. I really enjoyed the conversation. I want to be cognizant of everyone's time. We said we'd run for 30. We're kind of coming up on that time. This has been a really great conversation. We've covered a whole bunch of ground on how people can kind of complement data with human insight and feedback that people get. So with that, Nick, thanks so much for joining us and sort of helping us on our virtual book tour. Really a pleasure to have you on, and I'm sure everybody really enjoyed the insights you provided.
Thanks, Andy. Congratulations again. Super exciting.
All right, thank you.
Want to keep the conversation going? You can visit our podcast hub, usertesting.com/podcast, and check out past episodes. If you haven't already, don't forget to follow us on Apple Podcast, Spotify, Overcast, or Google Play, so you can never miss a good episode. And if you enjoyed today's show, please share it with a friend or leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcast.